She whispered, "Don't stop." The rancher misread her words, and everything changed. Growing up in a small town in Texas, he had learned early that life on the ranch demanded hard work, patience, and a quiet strength. Every morning he woke before the sun, pulled on his worn boots, and made his way out to the fields. The ranch had been in his family for 3 generations, and he felt a deep responsibility to keep it running, no matter what. He liked the rhythm of the work. There was something comforting about the routine, the same chores repeated day after day, the same cattle grazing peacefully in the pastures. It was not glamorous, and it was certainly not easy, but it was honest work. Tamaz enjoyed the simplicity of his life. He didn't seek attention, didn't go out to parties, and rarely left the ranch unless he needed supplies. For him, the land was home, and the cattle were like family. Despite the hard work, there were moments of beauty on the ranch that made everything worthwhile. In the early mornings, when the sun stretched across the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Tamaz would pause for a moment, leaning on the fence, and take it all in. The quiet of the morning, broken only by the distant call of a bird or the soft clop of a horse's hooves, was a kind of peace that few people outside the ranch could understand. It reminded him why he loved this life. But life on the ranch could also be lonely. Tamaz had grown used to his solitude. Most of his friends had left town for college or city jobs, and family members were busy with their own lives. The town was small, and social life was limited. He had never been very good at making small talk or connecting with strangers. Most days he spoke more to his cattle than to people, and that suited him just fine. He didn't mind being alone, but sometimes when the nights were long and quiet, he felt a small tug of longing, a wish for someone to share the ranch, the work, and the silence with. That summer the ranch hired a seasonal helper. Her name was Lily. She was young, energetic, and full of life, a contrast to Tamaz's quiet, steady presence. Lily had grown up in a nearby town and had always loved animals. She had experience with horses and farm work, and she had come to the ranch eager to learn more. From the first day, she was cheerful, polite, and willing to work hard. Tamaz watched her carefully. He wasn't used to having someone new around, and he wasn't sure what to make of her. Lily had a natural ease with the animals, and the way she handled the horses reminded him of his younger sister, who had loved horses but moved away years ago. There was something familiar in her movements, her laughter, and the way she carried herself. But Tamaz also noticed how different she was from him, her energy, her curiosity, and the way she asked questions about everything on the ranch. At first, their interactions were simple and professional. Tamaz would assign tasks, and Lily would complete them, sometimes asking questions when she wasn't sure. She was a quick learner, and he found himself quietly impressed. It was unusual for him to meet someone who took to the ranch work so naturally. The days were long and the work was exhausting, but he appreciated having someone who could share the labor. As the days passed, they began to talk more. Mostly about work at first, the fences, the cattle, the horses, but slowly small personal stories started to slip in. Lily would mention her hometown, her dreams of working with animals, and her love for the outdoors. Tamaz, who rarely spoke about himself, found himself telling her small things about the ranch, about the challenges he faced, and the joys of ranch life. It was a slow, careful connection, one that neither of them fully recognized at first. One hot afternoon, they were fixing a broken fence at the far end of the pasture. The sun beat down, making sweat run down their backs, and the task was tedious. Lily struggled with one of the fence posts, trying to dig it deep into the dry soil. Tamaz walked over to help, gently guiding her hands and showing her a better technique. As she worked, she smiled and said softly, "Don't stop, you're doing great." Tamaz froze for a moment. The words were simple, innocent, meant to encourage her to keep going, but in his mind they felt different. Something about the softness of her voice, the way she looked at him, made him pause. He had never been in situations like this before. He wasn't used to interpreting the intentions of young women around him, and his mind began to imagine possibilities that weren't there. Shaking off the moment, he focused on the work. He told himself he was reading too much into it, that Lily was simply being kind and encouraging. But even as he tried to focus on the fence, he noticed how much energy she brought to the ranch, how she seemed to find joy in the labor itself, and how her presence made the long, lonely days feel less empty. There was something about Lily that made Tamaz think of the world outside the ranch, a world he had almost forgotten existed. By the end of the week, the bond between them was subtle but noticeable. They laughed together while mending fences, shared stories during lunch breaks, and quietly appreciated each other's presence. Tamaz found himself watching Lily when she wasn't looking, noticing the way she moved, how she cared for the animals, and the brightness she brought to the dusty ranch. Lily, on the other hand, respected Tamaz for his knowledge, his quiet strength, and his deep care for the land. She felt safe around him, even though she could sense his occasional shyness and awkwardness in social situations. Evenings on the ranch were the quietest part of the day. After a long day's work, Tamaz and Lily would sit on the porch of the old ranch house, sipping water and listening to the soft sounds of the countryside. The sun would sink low behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the cattle would settle down in the pastures. It was in these quiet moments that the connection between them grew stronger, not in words, but in shared presence. Tamaz began to realize that Lily's arrival had changed something in him. Her energy reminded him that life could be more than routine, that companionship could be quiet and simple, yet meaningful. He didn't rush these feelings. He didn't know what they meant, but he allowed himself to notice them. Lily, too, felt a subtle shift in her daily routine. The ranch felt less intimidating with Tamaz's guidance, and she started to appreciate the quiet steadiness he offered. That summer, the ranch became more than a place of work. It became a space where two very different lives intersected, each learning from the other. Tamaz learned to appreciate the presence of someone new, someone who brought a spark of life into his ordered world. Lily learned patience, resilience, and the value of quiet strength. Each day built small moments that mattered, shared laughter, gentle encouragement, and mutual respect. And so, the ranch continued to hum with its familiar rhythm, but now there was a subtle change in the air. Something unspoken lingered between them, a quiet curiosity and connection. Tamaz didn't understand it fully, and Lily didn't either, but the beginnings of a story had begun, one that would shape their summer, test their understanding, and ultimately teach them lessons neither had expected. Little did they know, the words spoken that afternoon, simple words of encouragement, would set off a chain of events that would test their patience, their understanding, and their ability to navigate the complexities of human connection. The ranch, which had always been a place of routine and solitude, was slowly becoming a place of change, learning, and emotional discovery. The morning sun rose slowly over the ranch, casting long shadows across the fields. Tamaz was already up as usual, walking along the fence line to check the cattle. The air was crisp, carrying the faint smell of earth and hay. He liked mornings like this, the quiet, the predictable work, and the gentle way the day began. But today he felt something different, a small flutter of unease he couldn't quite place. Lily arrived soon after, humming softly as she carried a bucket of water to the horses. She greeted Tamaz with a bright smile, and for a moment he felt his chest tighten. He told himself it was just the sunlight, just the start of another long day. Still, he noticed the way she moved with confidence and grace, the way she spoke to the animals as if they were old friends. Their work that morning involved checking the fences along the eastern pasture. The soil there was hard and rocky, and some of the posts had begun to lean after last week's storm. Tamaz assigned tasks, giving Lily the tools she would need. She nodded, her eyes sparkling with eagerness, and got to work. At first, everything went smoothly. They worked side by side, exchanging casual words about the work and the weather. But as the hours passed, the day grew hotter and the work became more difficult. One of the fence posts refused to go into the ground, no matter how hard Lily tried. Frustration crept onto her face, and Tamaz stepped closer to offer guidance. He gently adjusted her hands, showing her the right angle, and whispered words of encouragement. "Don't stop, keep going, you're doing it right." For Lily, the words were exactly what she needed. She smiled, feeling motivated, and redoubled her efforts. But for Tamaz, the words lingered longer than he expected. The softness of her voice, the way she looked at him as she spoke, seemed different somehow. He could feel his heart beating faster, a mix of confusion and curiosity. He told himself he was imagining things, that Lily's words were purely about the work, but his mind couldn't help wandering. By lunchtime, the sun had climbed high and the air felt heavy. They paused under the shade of an old oak tree, drinking water and eating sandwiches Lily had brought. For a while, they simply sat in silence, listening to the distant sounds of the ranch, the lowing of the cattle, the clatter of hooves, the faint rustle of leaves in the breeze. It was peaceful, but Tamaz couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between them, even slightly. After lunch, they returned to the fence. Tamaz noticed that Lily was more careful now, following his instructions closely, nodding whenever he offered advice. He felt a mixture of pride and discomfort. He had never been in a situation where he worried about how someone perceived him while working. His thoughts became a tangle of professionalism and personal curiosity. The tension grew slowly over the next few days. Tamaz found himself watching Lily more than he intended. He noticed small details, the way she tied her hair back before working, the careful way she handled the horses, the laughter that escaped her lips even during difficult chores. He realized that he looked forward to her presence in a way he hadn't expected. Lily, on the other hand, began to notice Tamaz's quiet attentiveness. She appreciated his knowledge and the gentle way he corrected mistakes without raising his voice. She also sensed moments of awkwardness, small pauses where he seemed unsure how to interact with her. It wasn't discomfort, exactly, but a subtle tension that lingered between them. Lily respected him, but she didn't know how to interpret the new dynamic. One evening, after the day's work was done, Tamaz walked over to the barn to check on the horses. He found Lily brushing one of the mares, humming a soft tune. The golden light of the setting sun fell across her face, making her look almost like she belonged to the ranch itself. Tamaz stopped for a moment, unsure whether to speak or simply watch. He told himself again that he was overthinking, that her attention was on the animals, not him. "Tamaz," Lily said suddenly, breaking his thoughts. "Could you help me with this saddle?" Her voice was calm, friendly, and professional. He walked over, adjusting the saddle with practiced hands. As he worked, he tried to focus on the task, but he could feel the tension building inside him. Every small touch of her hands brushing against his arm, every shared glance, seemed amplified in his mind. The days passed, and small misunderstandings began to appear. Tamaz misread subtle cues, interpreting friendly gestures as more than they were. He wanted to be careful, not to upset Lily or overstep, but the uncertainty made him anxious. He found himself imagining conversations that never happened, moments that never occurred, and potential outcomes that were unlikely. One afternoon, as they led the cattle back to the barn, Lily spoke encouragingly again. "You're doing well, Tamaz. Don't stop now." The words, simple and innocent, caused a knot of confusion in his chest. In his mind, they felt different this time, not just about work but about him. He paused, unsure how to respond, and Lily noticed his hesitation. "Are you okay?" she asked, concern in her eyes. Tamaz quickly nodded, forcing a smile. "Yes, just thinking about the fence," he said, though he knew it wasn't true. The words felt hollow even to him. Lily nodded and continued walking, leaving him to his thoughts. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had crossed an invisible line in his own mind, even if nothing had actually happened. Over the next week, the tension grew. Tamaz tried to maintain professionalism, focusing on the work and avoiding unnecessary conversation. But every glance from Lily, every shared laugh, seemed magnified. He caught himself daydreaming about moments that hadn't occurred, worrying about how he might have misread her intentions. He felt a mix of excitement and fear, a new emotion he had never experienced before. Lily remained unaware of the intensity brewing in Tamaz's mind. She continued to do her work, smiling when he offered guidance and listening attentively to his instructions. She noticed moments of awkwardness, but assumed it was simply part of getting to know a new person on the ranch. She had no reason to suspect the growing confusion inside Tamaz, and so the summer days continued with both of them navigating their feelings carefully. Then came the day of the storm. Dark clouds rolled in unexpectedly, heavy with rain and wind. Tamaz and Lily were in the pasture, trying to secure loose equipment when the storm hit. Lightning flashed across the sky, and the first drops of rain fell hard against the earth. They ran to the barn, slipping in the mud and laughing despite the danger. In those moments of shared urgency, the line between professional and personal blurred even further in Tamaz's mind. Once inside the barn, drenched and out of breath, they paused to catch their bearings. The smell of wet hay filled the air, and the horses moved restlessly in their stalls. Tamaz handed Lily a dry towel, and she smiled gratefully. In that small, ordinary act, he felt a connection stronger than before, a sense that they were in this together, facing challenges side by side. That night after the storm passed, the ranch was quiet. Tamaz walked through the fields, reflecting on the events of the past days. He realized that his feelings were growing more complicated, more difficult to control. He didn't know how to separate admiration, respect, and curiosity from something more personal. He felt torn between wanting to maintain professionalism and the urge to acknowledge the new emotions rising within him. Meanwhile, Lily remained unaware of the depth of Tamaz's thoughts. She noticed small signs of change, how he seemed quieter, more pensive, but she interpreted them as the natural result of long hours and heavy work. She respected him, trusted him, and felt safe in his guidance, unaware that the simple words she had spoken earlier, "Don't stop," had set off a chain of confusion in his mind. As the summer continued, both of them grew in subtle ways. Tamaz learned patience with his own emotions, realizing he needed to understand and control his reactions. Lily learned resilience, discovering that the ranch required not just strength but calm judgment and careful attention. They built an unspoken partnership, helping each other navigate the challenges of ranch life, while unknowingly teetering on the edge of misunderstanding and unspoken feelings. By the end of this week, the tension between them had become noticeable, though unspoken. Tamaz was careful to maintain distance, while Lily focused on her work. Each interaction carried a weight of unspoken thought, small gestures loaded with meaning that neither fully understood. The ranch, which had always been predictable, quiet, and orderly, now held a new layer of complexity, one shaped by emotions neither of them had fully acknowledged. The summer days stretched on, filled with work, sun, and the quiet beauty of the land. Yet beneath the surface, an invisible current ran between them, a current of misread words, subtle gestures, and emotions waiting to be understood. Tamaz knew something had changed, though he didn't yet know the full consequences. And Lily, blissfully unaware, continued her days with hope, energy, and trust, not knowing that her simple encouragement had already begun to alter the course of the summer in ways neither of them could imagine. The days following the storm felt different on the ranch. The air was heavier, and even the sunlight seemed sharper, more aware of the small tension that had begun to linger between Tamaz and Lily. For Tamaz, every interaction with her became a careful calculation. He wanted to remain professional, but the misreading of her words, the simple encouragement, "Don't stop," had planted a seed of confusion he could not shake. He wondered constantly if he was imagining things, or if Lily might feel something similar. One morning, Tamaz arrived at the barn earlier than usual. The sky was pale blue, and the dew still clung to the grass. Lily was already there, brushing one of the horses with careful strokes. She smiled when she saw him, the kind of smile that felt bright and genuine. Tamaz smiled back, but he felt an unexpected nervousness. It was a strange feeling. He had worked with animals his whole life and managed countless tasks on the ranch without thought, but this simple greeting made his chest tighten. They spent the morning repairing a section of fence along the northern pasture. The soil there was stubborn, and the wind carried the faint scent of wildflowers from the nearby hills. Tamaz tried to focus solely on the work, offering instructions when necessary. But every time Lily laughed or her hand brushed against his, he felt a wave of tension he could not control. It was confusing, and he was unsure how to behave. Lily, for her part, noticed Tamaz seemed quieter than usual. He was still patient and helpful, but there were moments where he hesitated, where his usual confidence seemed to falter. She assumed he was simply tired from the long days of work, or perhaps preoccupied with ranch tasks. She didn't yet understand that he was struggling to separate his emotions from his professional duties. That afternoon, while leading a group of cattle back to the barn, an incident occurred that neither of them could forget. One of the cows had gotten loose and wandered toward the far edge of the pasture. Tamaz immediately moved to guide it back, and Lily followed closely behind. The cow was stubborn, and as they worked together to corral it, Tamaz reached out to steady Lily when she tripped in the mud. The simple touch, meant only to prevent her from falling, carried more weight in Tamaz's mind than he expected. Lily, startled but unharmed, looked up at him with a quick, questioning glance. "Thanks," she said softly, and went back to her work. Tamaz's heart raced. He told himself repeatedly that it was only a reflex, only concern for her safety, yet his mind had already begun imagining scenarios far beyond reality. Later, as they cleaned the barn, a neighbor drove by to deliver feed. He noticed the quiet tension between the two and, without thinking, made a small joke about young workers and ranch life. Lily laughed politely, but Tamaz felt a wave of self-consciousness wash over him. He realized that even the smallest interaction could now be misread, either by him or by others. By the end of the day, the misreading had begun to grow. Tamaz misinterpreted Lily's friendly gestures and encouragement as signs of personal interest. A simple smile, a laugh, or a word of praise became magnified in his mind. He tried to act normal to remain professional, but his thoughts betrayed him. He worried that even small actions could be misunderstood, and that anxiety made him fumble over simple tasks he had once done without thought. That night, after everyone had left the barn, Tamaz walked through the pasture alone. He gazed at the horizon, the setting sun painting everything in warm gold and orange tones. He tried to calm his mind, reminding himself that Lily was just doing her job, just being kind. Yet the memory of her words, the soft encouragement, lingered. "Don't stop," simple, harmless words, and yet they had grown into a tangle of confusion in his mind. Meanwhile, Lily reflected on the day as well. She had noticed subtle changes in Tamaz's behavior. At times he seemed hesitant, almost distant, and at others, overly attentive. She attributed it to exhaustion, or perhaps the aftermath of the storm, never imagining that he had misread her intentions entirely. She trusted him completely, but she began to feel a small unease, a sense that something in their interaction had shifted without explanation. The following week brought more challenges. A new task required moving several heavy bales of hay from the storage shed to the fields. Tamaz and Lily worked together, lifting and carrying the bales. Their hands occasionally brushed, and every touch now felt charged with meaning for Tamaz. He became acutely aware of every movement, every glance, and every word, fearing he might misinterpret a friendly gesture. One evening, while unloading hay, Lily paused and said, "You're doing really well, Tamaz. Don't give up now." Her voice was gentle, encouraging, but in that moment Tamaz froze. The words, innocent and supportive, echoed in his mind like a whisper meant just for him. He imagined meanings that were not there, and the tension in his chest grew. He knew logically that she was speaking about the work, but emotionally he could not separate it from his own hopes and confusion. That night, Tamaz barely slept. He lay on the porch of the ranch house, staring at the stars. He replayed the day over and over, analyzing every gesture, every word, every glance. His mind was a storm of doubt and misreading. He began to fear that if he acted in any way, he might ruin the relationship completely, but if he did nothing, the tension would only grow. The turning point came the next morning. The ranch manager, Mr. Rodriguez, stopped by to inspect the fences. He observed the subtle interactions between Tamaz and Lily and noticed a small but telling hesitation in Tamaz's movements. Misreading the situation himself, Mr. Rodriguez assumed Tamaz was becoming too personally involved with the helper. He made a quiet comment intended as advice about maintaining professional boundaries. Tamaz felt a flush of embarrassment and Lily noticed the tension. After the manager left, Lily asked, "Is everything okay?" Tamaz struggled to find words. He wanted to explain, but he didn't fully understand his own confusion. Instead, he nodded, forcing a small smile, and returned to the fence. Lily felt a ripple of unease herself, unsure why he seemed so distant. Both of them carried a weight they could not name, and the simple trust that had existed between them began to feel fragile. As the days went by, the ranch staff started to notice the subtle shift. Tamaz became quieter, more reserved, and Lily began to keep a careful distance. The small gestures, once innocent and friendly, now felt charged with misunderstanding. Both of them felt the strain, yet neither could fully explain it. The ranch, once a place of rhythm and calm, now held an undercurrent of tension and uncertainty. One afternoon, while working near the stables, a minor accident happened. One of the horses spooked, kicking a bucket and sending water spilling across the ground. Lily jumped back, startled, and Tamaz moved quickly to steady her. The touch was accidental but necessary, yet in his mind, it was another reminder of his growing confusion. Lily, sensing his unease, felt a sudden wave of awkwardness. The moment passed quickly, but it left an imprint on both of them. By the end of the week, Tamaz realized that his misreading had begun to affect not only his thoughts but also his work. He hesitated over tasks he once completed with ease. He second-guessed instructions and avoided unnecessary interactions with Lily. The weight of imagined expectations and the fear of misunderstanding was heavy. Lily, too, felt a subtle shift, sensing caution where there had once been ease. Their interactions became formal, careful, and measured. Every word, every smile, every gesture was now analyzed, leaving both of them exhausted by the end of the day. The work continued as always, but the emotional undercurrent was undeniable. A simple summer that had begun with quiet companionship and shared labor had become a landscape of tension, uncertainty, and misread intentions. Tamaz knew something had to change, but he did not yet know how. He felt trapped between his emotions and the reality of the situation. Lily, unaware of the depth of his internal struggle, continued her work with diligence, but the faint unease in the air weighed on her. The ranch, once a place of comfort and routine, had become a setting where small gestures carried unforeseen meaning, and simple words, words meant to encourage, had become a catalyst for misunderstanding. The stage was set for the summer's next chapter, one where miscommunication would escalate, where feelings would clash with reality, and where both Tamaz and Lily would be forced to confront the consequences of assumptions and misread signals. The quiet tension, once subtle, was now undeniable, and the choices each of them made in the coming days would shape not just their work, but the trust, friendship, and respect they had built on the ranch. The days after the storm and the misread words felt heavier on the ranch. Tamaz found himself working in silence more often, avoiding conversations with Lily except when necessary. Every instruction he gave, every glance he cast, was carefully measured, as if he were walking on thin ice. He worried constantly about being misunderstood, about overstepping invisible boundaries that had only formed in his mind. His usually steady routine now carried a weight he could not shake. Lily noticed the change immediately. The easy rhythm they had shared, laughing while mending fences, quietly working together in the barn, sharing stories about their lives, had been replaced by careful politeness. She would ask a question about a task, and Tamaz would answer quickly, then return to his work, avoiding eye contact. The warmth that had made the ranch feel alive was gone, replaced with tension neither of them fully understood. The other ranch hands began to notice too. Small comments and sideways glances hinted at a subtle shift in atmosphere. Tamaz had always been respected for his skill and calm demeanor, and Lily had been welcomed as a bright, hardworking presence. Now, the quiet unease between them seemed to ripple across the ranch. Even casual jokes or comments from coworkers sometimes fell flat, as if everyone was unsure how to navigate the new dynamic. One afternoon, a neighbor came to discuss the upcoming cattle drive. He noticed the distance between Tamaz and Lily, and without intending harm, made a teasing remark about the helper and the rancher growing too close. Lily laughed awkwardly, and Tamaz felt his face burn. He wanted to explain, to clarify that nothing was happening, but he couldn't find the words. Instead, he focused on his work, but the seed of doubt had been planted. By midweek, the strain began affecting the work itself. Tamaz hesitated before giving instructions, unsure how to phrase them without causing confusion. Lily, sensing his tension, became more cautious, second-guessing her every action. Simple tasks took longer than usual. A fence repair that normally would have taken an hour stretched into the afternoon. Both felt frustrated, yet neither could openly discuss the problem. The ranch, which relied on smooth teamwork, was beginning to suffer. One evening, as the sun began to dip behind the hills, Tamaz stayed late to check on the cattle. Lily offered to help, but he politely declined. She watched him move among the animals, noting his careful attention, his quiet patience, and the way he treated each cow with respect. She admired him, but the awkward tension made her uncertain of how to act around him. Tamaz, for his part, was aware of her presence but turned away, not wanting to risk any misread gesture. That night, he sat alone on the porch, the cool air brushing against his face. He thought about the past week, the moments of tension, the accidental touches, the misinterpreted words. He realized that his misreading of Lily's simple encouragement had created a chain reaction that was now affecting not just their relationship, but the entire ranch. He felt a mix of guilt, embarrassment, and confusion. He didn't want to lose Lily's trust, yet he also didn't want to appear weak or unprofessional. Lily, meanwhile, reflected on her own feelings. She noticed the distance in Tamaz, the careful way he avoided certain interactions, and the subtle tension in his body language. She wondered if she had done something wrong, or if she had misread his intentions. The worry weighed on her, making her more cautious and less confident in her work. The ranch that had once felt like a place of learning and camaraderie now carried a quiet heaviness that neither of them could easily shake. The situation reached a breaking point one morning. A new task required moving a group of young calves to a different pasture. Tamaz and Lily worked together, but the unspoken tension made every movement deliberate and cautious. One calf bolted unexpectedly, and in the scramble, Tamaz accidentally brushed against Lily's shoulder while guiding the animal. It was a small, accidental touch, necessary to prevent injury, but it immediately triggered a wave of embarrassment and anxiety in him. Lily startled but quickly regained her composure. "It's okay," she said softly, though her voice carried a hint of unease. Tamaz nodded, his face flushed, and continued with the task. In that small interaction, both realized how delicate their relationship had become. A single gesture, simple and innocent, now carried a weight neither of them had anticipated. The days that followed were filled with careful interactions and silent misunderstandings. Tamaz became more withdrawn, spending long hours alone in the fields, while Lily focused intently on her tasks. Both avoided unnecessary conversation, yet the tension was palpable. The work continued, but the joy and ease that had once defined their days together had vanished. Every glance, every word, every movement was now filtered through a lens of caution. One afternoon, the ranch manager called Tamaz into his office. He had noticed the growing tension and was concerned about how it might affect the ranch. "Tamaz," he said gently, "I know you and Lily are both hardworking, but I want to make sure everything is professional. Any misunderstanding can create problems, and I don't want that for anyone here." Tamaz felt a rush of shame and anxiety. He nodded, realizing that the situation had already begun affecting the broader team. He wanted to explain, to make clear that nothing inappropriate had happened, but the words felt heavy and inadequate. The manager's advice, though well-intentioned, only reminded him of the delicate position he now found himself in. Lily, sensing the shift after the conversation, became even more careful. She focused strictly on her duties, keeping interactions with Tamaz limited to what was necessary for the work. She felt a mix of relief and sadness, relief that boundaries were clear, but sadness that the connection they had begun to build had been disrupted. The energy on the ranch had changed, and both of them felt the weight of unspoken words and misunderstood gestures. Meanwhile, the other ranch hands began to pick up on the tension. Casual conversations that once included both Tamaz and Lily now became more formal. Small jokes were avoided, and the easy camaraderie that had defined the team was replaced with careful politeness. Everyone sensed that something had shifted, though no one knew the full story. The ranch, once a place of rhythm and shared effort, now carried an undercurrent of caution and concern. As the week wore on, Tamaz became aware of how much the situation was affecting him personally. He felt frustrated with himself for misreading Lily's intentions, and at the same time, he felt a deep desire to repair the trust that had been strained. He realized that he needed guidance and reflection if he was going to navigate this misunderstanding without causing further harm. He sought advice from an elder rancher in town, someone who had worked alongside Tamaz's family for decades. The elder listened patiently as Tamaz explained his confusion and anxiety, without going into unnecessary detail about Lily. "Tamaz," the elder said gently, "sometimes we misread what people mean. The important thing is to be honest, keep your actions respectful, and don't let your imagination turn words into something they're not. Work hard, communicate clearly, and the rest will follow." Tamaz felt a small sense of relief. He realized he needed to regain focus, to approach his work with clarity, and to rebuild the trust that had been shaken. He began to take steps, carefully planning his interactions with Lily, keeping his gestures neutral, and making sure every word he spoke was clear and professional. Lily, on the other hand, continued to work diligently. She remained polite and professional, but she began to notice a subtle shift in Tamaz over the following days. He was calmer, more focused, and less tense. Small gestures of kindness returned, though carefully measured, and she began to feel that the silent tension might slowly ease. Yet, the consequences of the misunderstanding had already left a mark. Both Tamaz and Lily had learned that even small words, misread intentions, and brief gestures could have lasting effects. They realized that trust was delicate, and that maintaining clear communication was essential in any relationship, professional or personal. By the end of the week, the ranch had regained some of its rhythm. The fences were repaired, the cattle were fed and moved properly, and the work that needed to be done had been completed efficiently. The tension between Tamaz and Lily, though still present, had lessened slightly. Both were cautious, but hopeful that they could move forward without further incident. Tamaz reflected on the week's events. He understood now that a single misunderstanding could escalate quickly, affecting not just personal relationships but the broader environment. He also realized that accountability, humility, and clear communication were vital to repairing trust. Lily had been professional, kind, and patient, and he felt a deep respect for her resilience. Lily, too, thought about what had happened. She recognized that her words, though innocent, had been misinterpreted. She also saw how carefully Tamaz was working to correct the situation and maintain professionalism. She admired his efforts and felt a cautious optimism that the tension could be resolved with patience and understanding. The summer continued, but the events of the past weeks had left a permanent mark on both of them. They had learned that even in a place of routine and simplicity, emotions could complicate life in unexpected ways. They understood the importance of clear communication, respect for boundaries, and awareness of how small actions could be perceived differently than intended. The ranch remained their shared space of work, learning, and growth. Yet beneath the calm exterior, both Tamaz and Lily carried the lessons of misread words, misunderstood gestures, and the slow, careful rebuilding of trust. They knew that the coming days would test their patience, resilience, and understanding, and that the choices they made next would shape not just their relationship, but the harmony of the entire ranch. The summer days slowly began to change, moving toward the soft warmth of late afternoon and the longer shadows that signaled the end of the day. The ranch felt different now, still bustling with work, still filled with the sounds of animals and the wind through the fields. But the tension that had hovered over Tamaz and Lily had begun to lift. Small signs of normalcy were returning, though both knew the events of the past weeks had left a mark. Tamaz woke earlier than usual that morning, feeling the calm clarity of a mind that had spent nights reflecting on his actions. He realized he needed to take responsibility for his misunderstandings, to rebuild the trust that had been shaken. The silence he had carried for days had done little to solve the problem. He knew now that careful, honest communication was the only way forward. Lily arrived soon after, carrying her bucket of water and humming softly as she moved through the barn. She noticed Tamaz already at work, checking the fences and organizing tools. There was a quiet respect in the way they observed each other this morning, a subtle understanding that both were ready to move forward. Neither rushed the interaction, but the air felt lighter, the unspoken tension easing just a little with each careful glance. Tamaz decided it was time to speak. "Lily," he began, his voice steady but soft, "I want to apologize for the confusion over the past weeks. I misread things, and I let my imagination create problems that weren't real. I never wanted to make you uncomfortable." Lily paused, processing his words. She felt a mix of relief and validation. "Tamaz," she replied gently, "thank you for saying that. I had noticed the tension too. I didn't want to assume anything and I wasn't sure how to help, but I appreciate your honesty." The simple conversation shifted the energy between them. It was not dramatic or emotional in a flashy way, but it carried weight because it was real and grounded. Tamaz felt the heavy knot of guilt begin to unwind, replaced by a careful hope that they could return to the trust and respect they had shared before. Lily, too, felt a sense of relief, knowing that the misunderstanding was acknowledged and could be addressed with patience and clarity. Over the next few days, they began to rebuild their rhythm on the ranch. Their interactions became professional yet warm, measured yet natural. Tamaz offered guidance with confidence but without the previous tension, and Lily responded with attentiveness, her energy bright and steady. Small moments of encouragement returned, but now they were grounded in mutual understanding, free from the cloud of misreading that had hung over them. One afternoon, they worked together to repair a section of fence that had been damaged by a recent storm. The work required cooperation, patience, and careful attention. As they lifted posts and hammered them into place, they spoke easily, sharing stories and small jokes about the animals. Tamaz found himself smiling genuinely, appreciating Lily's skill and dedication, while Lily noticed his quiet humor and steady guidance. The ease of their collaboration reminded them both why they had valued each other's presence from the start. The other ranch hands noticed the shift as well. The subtle tension that had once made the team cautious and awkward was gone. Conversations flowed naturally again, laughter returned to the barns, and even the livestock seemed calmer with the restored harmony in the environment. It was a reminder to Tamaz and Lily that relationships, like fences and barns, required attention, care, and occasional repair, but the results were always worth the effort. Tamaz also took time to reflect on his own growth. He realized that the misreading had been a lesson in patience, humility, and self-awareness. He had learned the importance of distinguishing between imagined feelings and reality, of observing actions carefully before assigning meaning, and of communicating openly when misunderstandings arose. These lessons were not easy, but they strengthened him both as a person and as a leader on the ranch. Lily, too, reflected on her own journey. She recognized that being patient, observant, and clear in communication was essential in a setting like the ranch. She had learned that trust is delicate, and that even simple words could carry unintended weight. Her resilience, professionalism, and willingness to continue working, despite the tension, had allowed her to grow stronger and more confident in her abilities. One evening, after the work was done and the cattle were settled, Tamaz and Lily sat on the porch of the ranch house, sipping water and enjoying the fading light. The wind carried the soft scents of the fields, and the quiet was no longer heavy. It was comfortable and calming. They spoke about the summer, about the challenges they had faced, and about the lessons they had learned. Their conversation was easy, free of tension, and carried a sense of closure that both had needed. "Tamaz," Lily said, "I think this summer has taught both of us a lot. Not just about the ranch, but about patience, trust, and understanding." He nodded. "Yes, it has. I've learned that even the smallest words or gestures can mean a lot, and that it's important to communicate clearly. I'll make sure I never let a misunderstanding grow like that again." They shared a quiet smile, a simple acknowledgement of the growth they had experienced together. It was not a dramatic declaration, but it carried a sense of completeness. The misread words, the tension, and the uncertainty had passed, leaving behind lessons that would guide them in the future. In the following weeks, their days continued with steady work and mutual respect. Tamaz mentored Lily with patience and clarity, while she responded with enthusiasm and attentiveness. The ranch operated smoothly, and both felt a sense of accomplishment, not only in the work they completed but in the relationship they had nurtured and repaired. The summer that had begun with uncertainty and tension now ended with a sense of harmony and understanding. Tamaz also found that the experience had changed his perspective on life beyond the ranch. He realized that relationships, whether professional or personal, required awareness, empathy, and careful attention. Misunderstandings were natural, but with honesty and patience, they could be resolved. He felt more confident not just in his work, but in his ability to navigate human interactions with clarity and respect. Lily, too, carried the lessons with her. She felt proud of how she had handled the situation, how she had remained professional and kind despite the tension. She also recognized that empathy and observation were powerful tools in understanding others. She knew that her experience on the ranch would shape her approach to work, relationships, and challenges in the future. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and painted the sky in soft shades of orange and pink, Tamaz and Lily walked together through the pasture. The air was calm, the cattle were grazing peacefully, and the world felt steady and reliable once more. They spoke about the animals, the upcoming tasks, and small personal stories. Their connection was natural, comfortable, and grounded in mutual respect. Tamaz realized that this summer had been more than a season of work. It had been a season of growth, reflection, and understanding. Lily had taught him patience, resilience, and the importance of clear communication. He had learned humility, self-awareness, and the power of addressing misunderstandings directly. Together, they had navigated the challenges of misread words, awkward tension, and unspoken emotions. Lily, walking alongside him, felt a similar sense of closure and clarity. She had learned that even in professional relationships, emotional awareness mattered. She had seen firsthand how quickly misunderstandings could escalate, and how careful, honest communication could restore trust. She felt stronger, wiser, and more confident in her ability to navigate both work and human connections. The ranch itself seemed to breathe with relief. The work was complete, the animals were cared for, and the team had regained its rhythm. The fences were repaired, the barns were organized, and the daily routines were smooth once again. It was a reflection of the growth and learning that had occurred not just in the land, but in the hearts and minds of those who worked it. As the summer drew to a close, Tamaz and Lily reflected quietly on all that had happened. What had started as a simple misunderstanding over words had grown into a series of challenges, testing patience, trust, and understanding. But in the end, both had emerged stronger, wiser, and more aware of the delicate balance between actions and interpretations. Their relationship, once strained, had been rebuilt on a foundation of honesty, respect, and patience. The lessons of the summer would remain with them, guiding their future interactions, shaping their decisions, and reminding them that even small words could have significant impact. Tamaz watched Lily as she tended to the horses one final time before the end of her season at the ranch. He felt gratitude, not only for her presence and help, but for the lessons she had helped teach him. Lily looked at him, her smile warm and confident, reflecting mutual respect and understanding. They didn't need words to acknowledge the journey they had shared. It was written in every glance, every gesture, and every moment of careful collaboration. As Lily packed her things to leave the ranch, Tamaz offered a simple, genuine farewell. "Thank you, Lily, for everything, for your work, your patience, and your understanding." She smiled softly. "Thank you, Tamaz. I've learned a lot too. This summer will stay with me for a long time." With that, she walked down the dirt path toward her home, leaving Tamaz standing on the porch, watching the sunset over the fields. The ranch was quiet, the animals settled, and the lessons of the summer were clear. Trust, patience, and honest communication were the keys to navigating misunderstandings, and both of them had discovered that with care, even the most confusing situations could lead to growth and understanding. The summer had changed them. The misread words, the tension, and the silent struggles were now part of their story, a story of patience, respect, and resilience. And as Tamaz returned to his work, he did so with a renewed sense of clarity, knowing that the lessons he had learned would guide him long after the season ended. The ranch continued, steady and enduring, a place of work, learning, and reflection. And within its fields, barns, and fences, the story of that summer, of misunderstanding, struggle, and eventual understanding, remained a quiet, enduring lesson for all who lived and worked there.